Al Jazeera Podcasts.
Today, a grieving community makes its choice.
We're grieving, we're frustrated, we're angry, we're heartbroken, we feel betrayed. This is an impossible choice for our community.
With one day to go before the U.S. election, the hard decisions facing Arab and Muslim Americans in Michigan. I'm Malika Bilal, and this is The Take.
I'm Harb. I am a journalist for Al Jazeera English, and I report on U.S. politics, Arab American communities, and foreign policy.
Ali, welcome back to The Take. It is always good to have you on. You are currently in Dearborn, Michigan, which is considered the epicenter of Arab America. And my read on the consensus from people there right now, based on reporting, based on social media, is that Kamala Harris must not want to win this state, a crucial swing state in the country's Midwest. And that's because in recent days, we've seen New York Representative Richie Torres, a really vocal defender of Israel, campaigning for Kamala Harris in the state. Then you had a prominent Muslim Democrat kicked out of a rally in Detroit for reasons he says are unclear to him.
And I asked, why are you kicking me out? I didn't do anything. They didn't want to provide any reason, and they just threatened me to arrest me and bring the police if I don't move.
And then there was this from former President Bill Clinton speaking at a rally in Michigan.
Hamas did not care about a homeland for the Palestinians. They wanted to kill Israelis and make Israel uninhabitable. Well, I got news for them. They were there first. Before there was, their faith existed.
How has all of that been playing out on the ground with people you're talking to in Michigan?
And I will add to the things you enumerated is that the vice president has been campaigning with Liz Cheney, the daughter of former vice president Dick Cheney, and that is not going very well to the ears and eyes of Arab Americans here in the state. So I've been talking to a lot of Arab Americans, Arab American elected officials, activists, as well as normal people, students, business owners, shoppers at grocery stores. And people are frustrated. People are grieving. People are angry. People are distraught. With the Bill Clinton comment, what went through people's mind is, what are they thinking? What is the Harris campaign thinking? What one activist told me is that it's quote unquote baffling how out of touch they are with this community. I mean, you had the Harris campaign bring in a former president who is not very popular in the community, and we could go back to the Cline massacre in Lebanon in 1996, in which 2 children from Dearborn were killed. And he came out when he was president and supported Israel and tried to justify the massacre. So you bring him on, he's already unpopular, and you let him just repeat the most staunchly pro-Israel talking points to convince our community to vote for you. People are bewildered more than they are angry, to be honest. And to be frank with you, Malika, at this stage, no minds are being swayed. People have largely made up their decision, but if anything, it cemented people's thinking, and it made the position of Arab American campaigners for Harris even more difficult, because now they're going to go and knock on doors and say, please vote for President Harris. And the response will be like, did you hear what Bill Clinton said a few days ago? So
yeah,
this is where things stand right now.
Gotta wonder about the strategy there. So Ali, let's set the stakes for our international audience. In the U.S., whoever wins the most votes across the country does not necessarily win the election. Michigan is a crucial stop on the way to the White House, though. Why is that? And why is Michigan's Arab American population being watched so closely right now?
So the Arab American Institute puts the number at 390,000. We're talking about Arab Americans. And this is from census data adjusted to undercounting. Now, that does not mean necessarily that we have 380,000 voters, because many of those people may not be citizens, so they cannot vote. Many of these people may be below the age of 18, so they may not vote. That excludes them. But we could safely say that we have a little more than 100,000 at least, and let's say tens and tens of thousands. So in the United States, as you said, the system does not run on nationwide popular vote. Think of it as a point system. Each state is assigned a number of points, and that's known as the Electoral College votes. Most of the states, the overwhelming majority of the states, are already done and dusted. That leaves a handful of states, 7 states actually, that are not known where they're going to go. It's a close race. Those are known as the swing states. Michigan is one of those 7 swing states. That means a few thousand votes could swing the state one way or another. Former President Donald Trump won Michigan by a little more than 10,000 votes in 2016. You could get 10,000 votes, not just in Dearborn, in a quarter of Dearborn. So when you have a constituency that's tens of thousands of votes in such a close race, it could decide the election. It could swing the state, and the state could decide the next president. And this is why you're seeing a lot of attention on Dearborn, Michigan, but on the broader Arab American community in Michigan. And I'll tell you, I go to a cafe and I'm seeing a lot of international journalists sitting with their notepads and their cameras. People are watching the city. And to be honest, there's a level of folks here, the residents, kind of enjoying that tension a little bit.
I can imagine that. So the Arab and Muslim communities are obviously not a monolith. There are a few different camps among them in Michigan when it comes to strategy for this election. And I want to know what you've been hearing from each of those camps. So let's start with those who are planning to vote for Kamala Harris. How dominant is that camp? Because in the past, the Democratic Party has received sizable support from Arab and Muslim voters in Michigan.
So I would like to preface to the listeners and the viewers that this is all anecdotal, but this is what I have seen. The support for Kamala Harris here in Dearborn, but also in the surrounding communities in Dearborn Heights and Hamtramck, is not very visible. You're not seeing a whole lot of it, right? You're not walking around and seeing Harris Waltz signs on people's front yards. There are select community advocates and people who work within the Democratic Party as Arab Americans who have come out and endorsed Kamala Harris. But how much is that support going to translate on the ground remains to be seen. People are, by and large, even though supporting Harris, furious with the Biden-Harris administration's support for Israel. And to them, this isn't just a moral issue. This isn't a political issue. It's a deeply personal issue. I remember when the offensive in Lebanon started, a doctor from Dearborn Heights told me we were struggling with the life-work genocide balance for the past year. And now it's home. Now my cousin got killed. His cousin was killed in the first day of the offensive. So this isn't some theoretical issue that's far away. For people here in Dearborn, by and large, everybody I've spoken to, they're not swayed by the argument that she's the lesser of two evils. Because when your family's being killed, there's no worse evil. This is the direct quote I heard yesterday from a 22-year-old Lebanese American college student. We survived 4 years of Trump, but our families and our people back home did not survive a single year of Biden-Harris.
Wow.
But those who are advocating for voting for Harris, and I've spoken to a few advocates in the community, what they say is, we have partners in this democratic coalition, right? African American Civil Rights Group, labor unions, reproductive rights groups who are standing with us on the issue of Palestine and who are standing with Harris. So we're standing back with them in hope that after the election, we can work together and push the vice president. So the thinking is very strategic, not emotional, not we love Kamala Harris.
More with Ali after the break. So, Ali, we have been talking about the different camps of voters in the Arab and Muslim community in Michigan. I want to go to the other group. You have Donald Trump, who has been making gains with Arab Americans based on polls. This is the former president who, during his time in office, introduced the so-called Muslim ban, and who, during this campaign, has used Palestinian as a slur.
He's become like a Palestinian, but they don't like him because he's a very bad Palestinian. He's a weak one.
And has been pretty open about wanting to let Benjamin Netanyahu, the Israeli prime minister, quote unquote, finish the job.
He said the only one who wants to keep going is Hamas. Actually, Israel is the one, and you should let him go and let him finish the job. He doesn't want to do it.
Despite that, he's been endorsed by some local Arab Muslim leaders, including the mayor of Hamtramck, the mayor of Dearborn Heights. And at a rally in a suburb of Detroit recently, he had at least one Arab American imam get up and speak on stage with others who were there with him.
We as Muslims stand with President Trump because he promises peace. He promises peace, not war.
Trump made an appearance in Dearborn on Friday, meeting with Arab American business leaders.
This meeting is for the community of Dearborn, so please let us welcome Mr. Donald J. Trump.
You've met people who are planning to vote for Trump. What do they tell you?
They say that the Democrats have taken our votes for granted for too long. But they also say that Trump has been incredibly open to the community, has been willing to meet with the community, has been willing to listen to the community, and has given them promises that he would bring peace to the Middle East. Now, that's a very vague promise. But to them, that promise is better than Liz Cheney, is better than Dick Cheney, is better than Bill Clinton, is better than Joe Biden, is better than Kamala Harris, whom they say in their administration oversaw a genocide that's still ongoing, by the way. So in a way, there's this thinking that we need to punish the Democrats, right? And people's strategies and people thinking, people's rationale in the pro-Trump camp, by the way, radically different. People are not on the same page. A Yemeni American activist who's voting for Trump, she told me, I want to take the credit if Kamala Harris loses. They're talking about, don't blame us if Harris loses. No, do blame us because we want to show that power and use it as capital to push for change in the future. But there are other people who say, no, Democrats are a lost case. Now we're firmly in the Republican camp.
Wow.
There are also social issues, Malika. This is
I was just going to ask, because of course we're talking about foreign policy, but if you're saying I'm now firmly in this camp, the camp of Donald Trump's version of the Republican Party, that means inevitably that comes with other social issues.
So there's the social front, right? Like there are folks who are conservative in this community, socially conservative. It came to life in the midterm elections where a lot of folks in the community had issues with certain books in the schools. And of course, the Republicans swept in and tried to capitalize on these controversies around LGBTQ issues and in the curriculum, issues of gender identity being introduced to the schools. The mayor of Hamtramck said in a recent event with our colleagues in Al Jazeera Arabic that this controversy around socially conservative issues was the catalyst, quote unquote, of this drift.
Wow.
Now, and then came the war. And the war was like, okay, now we're already sort of half a foot in the Republican Party because of these social issues. We're going to divorce the Democrats over Gaza, so may as well just go in like all the way to the other side.
But I wonder if it ever comes up in the conversation, the echoes of his presidency, the echoes of 2017, a time I know you and I both know well because we were reporting on it. It was the so-called Muslim ban. You had these huge demonstrations at airports, travelers being stranded at U.S. airports, protesters and lawyers showing up to support them. But that, of course, no pun intended, doesn't trump what they say is the punish Kamala Harris vote. Is that what I'm understanding?
I've sat with elected officials who have endorsed Trump's, Arab and Muslim elected officials who have endorsed Trump's. And I've read to them the statements, right? Islam hates us. The Quran has bad vibes. Michael Flynn, Islam is cancer. You know, the list we could, I'm sure we don't have enough time to read those statements, let alone the Muslim ban. There's always an effort to rationalize it somehow. So one of the explanations I heard is that, well, look, we're worried about hate, but we had a 6-year-old stabbed to death in Chicago. So they say, when Biden went and talked about the beheaded babies, which was a falsehood, he also fueled hate. So how much can we pay attention to rhetoric when we have actual hate crime going on? So that's one rationalization. Another rationalization is, yeah, he said all of these things in the past, but we live in the present. And look what he said at the rally. These are great people. He invited us to the stage. When we were walking off the stage, all these supposedly racist supporters were like reaching out to us and trying to shake our hands.
Wow.
And isn't it good to change hearts and minds? And a third rationalization is a sort of amnesia, which I think is not uncommon. People, when they make choices, to sort of get into mental games to forget the things that sort of would negate the choices that they made.
Yeah. It's really fascinating. Thank you for sharing those anecdotes, with the caveat that they are anecdotes, but they really do give a window into the thinking of some of the people that we're talking about. So, Ali, next up are the people who are voting third party, planning to vote for Jill Stein or another third party candidate. You mentioned someone earlier who wants the blame if Kamala Harris loses. But is there any worry about that among other voters, that their community is going to be the scapegoat? And that's not a good thing because we already see that blame game happening.
Mm-hmm. I think the mainstream media really gets this thing wrong, right? And the Democrats, right? The missing point is that if you don't vote for Kamala Harris, whether you vote for Trump, whether you vote for Jill Stein, or whether you leave the presidential ticket blank, you don't want Kamala Harris to be president. That's clear. Right. So it's not this alternative universe where Jill Stein's off the ballot and everybody who was going to vote for Jill Stein is going to vote for Kamala Harris. In fact, a local candidate for office who is backing Jill Stein told me that the Harris camp should be really, really, really grateful because many people voting for Jill Stein, when they go to that booth or when they submit their ballot, if she had not been on the ballot, they would have voted for Trump. And there's like the strategic thinking that you have this duopoly over the American voters by the two party, that if we vote third party, even if we don't win now, if we register enough votes, it could build momentum for a future to build a third party viable candidacy.
What's interesting about what you're saying, that you're hearing from voters, is that we had the opportunity to interview Jill Stein just a couple of days ago, and she said the same thing, that polls show that they are taking a sizable number of potential Trump voters away from that camp. Mm-hmm. Anecdotally, though, in my own groups and communities that I'm in, there are more people who say they weren't going to vote at all if they weren't going to be third party candidates, not that they would vote for Trump. So I wonder if you talk to any of those people who still say, we don't think we're going to vote. We're just not going to go out to the polls.
No, absolutely. I spoke to a lot of people who either are not voting or they're going to vote and leave the top of the ticket blank. There's a set of people who have given up on the system. And I could say some of my own family members, they don't want to vote. They voted for Biden in 2020. And look where we are. And then you have the more strategic people who want to continue to engage in the system, who say the choices at the top of the ticket are just too awful for us to engage in this. So what we will do is that we will vote down ballot, because this is where change can happen, right? This is where Rashida Tlaib was elected. This is where the mayor of Dearborn, Abdullah Hammoud, was elected. So let's build power at the bottom.
I know that you spoke to Layla Al-Abed, who is the sister of Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib and the co-chair of the Uncommitted National Movement. What did she tell you?
Layla is leaving the top of the ticket blank. And she described the situation in a way that I think resonates with a lot of people.
Over the last year, we've collectively been at a funeral. We're grieving, we're frustrated, we're angry, we're heartbroken, we feel betrayed. And then we're asked to, step away from this funeral, go into the ballot box, and now choose between candidates, none who actually have a plan that is going to stop the killing of people that we love and care about and the destruction of our homelands.
So it's very personal. It's very emotional. I've seen leaders of the uncommitted movement cry at the Democratic National Convention, knocking on the door of the Democratic Party for a seat at the table, for a speaker, and they were turned down. But again, with this sense of grief, with this sense of rejection from the Harris campaign, Layla, other folks are saying, we're not going away.
Finally, Ali, what often gets lost in these election cycles and the talk of politics is that politics is personal. And that's especially true for the people you're talking to who are saying that they are directly being impacted. They and their families are directly being impacted. And that's because many of them have family in Lebanon, Palestine, Yemen, places where we have watched bombs drop and devastation reign. How are people doing? Because I know in some of your conversations, your interviews with people, they involve tears.
Absolutely. More so than that. And I often have to hold back my own because I'm from South Lebanon. Mm-hmm. Yesterday, I went to pick up a sandwich. I walked in and the guy working behind the counter who knew me from years ago when I was here in Dearborn, he said, "How are you doing?" I said, "It's tough." He looked back at me and he said, "It's really tough." That's how people are doing. That when we ask each other here in this community, "How are you doing?" the answer is not fine. The answer is, it's tough. And you have this collective pain and grief that's overcome the entire community. And at the same time, we have to contend, the community has to contend with this election.
And that's the take. We really want to hear your thoughts on today's episode. What did you think of the discussion? Let us know in the comments below. We'll be reading through. We'll see you tomorrow.